Hi, I'm Amy Bateman. And if you're watching this, you're probably a founder like me. And if you are a founder, then you will have made some mistakes. I know that I definitely have. I've made a lot of them. When I started Career Cake back in 2010, I really thought I knew what I was doing. I had spent years helping people with their careers. I understood the market. I had the skills. But knowing how to help people get jobs is very different from building a company. And over the next 7 or 8 years that followed, through raising angel investment in 2015, going through venture capital rounds, scaling the team, and eventually selling and exiting, I made every mistake in the book. Some of them cost me money. Some of them cost me friendships, relationships. One of them cost me my health. So today I'm going to go through the 5 biggest mistakes that I made as a first-time founder. I'm hoping that by making this video, maybe you could avoid making some of the same mistakes. And if you're already making these mistakes, I want you to know that you're not alone, because there is always a way through. 90% of startups fail, but the ones that succeed don't succeed because the founder didn't make any mistakes. It's because they learned from those mistakes and they learned how to respond quick enough to keep going. So let's get into this. All right, so mistake number 1. I thought that rest was for people who weren't serious about success. In 2017, I took 4 days annual leave, just 4 days, for the entire year. I was in proper full-on hustle mode. We were scaling, I had investors. Me and the team, we had targets to hit, and I genuinely believed that if I took my foot off the gas, even for just a second, that everything would fall apart. I thought if I'm not working, if I'm not pushing myself, then I'm falling behind, I'm failing. And so I worked constantly. I worked late nights, early mornings, weekends, holidays. And you know what happens. I got burnt out. I got really, really badly burnt out. Burnout doesn't make you better. Burnout makes you terrible at everything. It just makes everything worse. Everything that I'd been working towards was definitely happening. We were growing, we were hitting milestones, we were, seeing success, but I had completely forgotten how to smile. It was horrible. It was so sad. I would just sit in meetings and just feel like I was underwater. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't make decisions. I was scared all the time. Like I felt fear like never before. And I wasn't frightened. It wasn't so much about the business failing. It was about me failing. It was about me not being enough. It was about me breaking. And when I did make those decisions, they were really slow to make. And they were really stressful to make because I didn't trust myself. My joy and my passion and my creativity, it completely dried up. I was distant with my team. I was distant from the people that I loved. And if a friend had come to me and said, right, Amy, I took 4 days off this year, or if a client said that to me, I'd be like, you're crazy. That is not sustainable. You're not a robot. You need some rest. But I just felt like the rules didn't apply to me. I just thought like I could just keep going. And that, I know now, comes from a place of insecurity. That actually comes from a place of feeling like you're not good enough, that you are less than. And I didn't know that at the time. But when you are constantly striving not to fail and to not let people down, it's because you're so grateful that they've trusted you. And you're so like, oh my goodness. You feel like such an imposter anyway. And you feel like you don't trust yourself to take a break because you're not good enough to take a break. You don't deserve it. You haven't earned it. You have to keep going. You have to keep being faster, better, quicker. And that's where it all comes from. This isn't, burnout and hustle and working really hard and not taking your annual leave. That doesn't come from, or that doesn't always come from, just not being able to control your time. That's not a productivity or issue. That is a I'm not worthy issue. That runs so deep. It's not a let's manage your calendar. That's not how you fix that. It's a let's manage how much you love yourself and how much you believe in yourself. That's what that is. So this is really what I want to say to you. You're not a robot. Taking your annual leave isn't weak. It's strategic. Your brain and your body need to rest. You need to rest in here and you need to rest in here so that you can perform out there. Because if you don't rest, your business is going to suffer. It's like you're the engine. And if the engine breaks, the whole thing is going to stop. Now I protect my rest like it's sacred. Honestly, my time, I'm like, to get to me is pretty hard. And I'm telling you that if you're in that place where you feel like you can't afford to take a break, that is exactly when you need to take one the most. Prevention is better than a cure, and you don't want to wait for burnout to make that decision for you. Do it now and really look at those worthiness issues and tackle that, the root of the problem. Okay, so mistake number 2, I said yes to everything. In the early days, I was just terrified of missing out on anything. Literally every opportunity felt like this could be the opportunity. Every meeting. So if somebody wanted a meeting, I would say yes. Coffee, no agenda, yes. Somebody wanted to be a partner, yes. Somebody had an idea for a new feature or something, or a potential client wants us to build something that's outside of what we actually do, I'd be like, yeah, say yes, then figure it out afterwards. And there's definitely reason to that. But there's also a lot of disadvantages to doing that. I thought that by saying yes, I was being flexible and entrepreneurial. But what it actually did was spread us thin. I remember that we had this partnership opportunity. In the early days, there was this like big corporate client, and they wanted us to build a custom platform for them. So rather than use our platform, they wanted us to build something for them. It was completely outside of what we normally did, but it was such a big name, and I was just so flattered that I was like, yeah, if we work with them, then imagine all of the other doors that'll open for us. So we said yes. We poured resources into it. Time, money, loads of energy. And you know what happened? We built something that was fine. It wasn't great, but it was fine. But because it wasn't brilliant, it wasn't the thing that we were great at, it diluted our core product and the results that we were used to getting. So our actual clients, the ones who did love what we were doing, started noticing that our quality was slipping. So that partnership, it didn't lead to anything really. You know, we did the work, we got paid, and then we moved on. But what had happened is that we completely burnt ourselves in the process. And I feel like it took us back 6 months because we were trying to be something that we weren't. So here's the lesson. Every yes to the wrong thing is a no to the right thing. When you say yes to everything, you dilute your focus, you dilute your brand, you dilute your energy, you dilute your superpower. You end up just being mediocre a lot of other things. And if you're being mediocre at a lot of things, you're not being exceptional at one thing. Now, I'm really ruthless about my yeses now. I am. Does this align with where I'm going? Does this play into my strengths, or not even my strengths, my 1 or 2 unique superpowers? Is this actually going to move the needle, or will it ultimately be a distraction? So your focus is your most valuable asset. You have to protect it, because as entrepreneurs, we get excited. We're positive people. You know, we want to make sure that, are we saying yes to something that is truly aligned with our long-term goals? Because sometimes people ask us to do things, and what we end up doing is saying yes because it's easier just to say yes than have that uncomfortable conversation where we say no. So then we say yes, and then we end up just ticking other people's to-do lists and building other people's dreams. And that's the whole reason why we're building our own business, right? We're building our dreams. So please try not to get distracted. It's okay to say yes to things, but only yes to things that move you closer to the vision that you really want to build for you. Another mistake that I made was to tell myself that I wasn't very good with numbers. I wasn't a numbers person, and I was very quick to delegate out the financials. Now, this is something that I hear a lot from female entrepreneurs and female founders that I work with. I don't hear this as much with men founders, with male founders, but with females, it's like, oh, I'm not very good at the business stuff. I'm not very good with numbers. And it's just not true. Anyway, a lot of the time it's just a story that we tell ourselves. But anyway, this is what happened with me. I told myself I wasn't very good with numbers. I told myself that the financials wasn't my thing. It was a weakness. And that delegating out your weaknesses is a strength, which it absolutely is, but not really when it comes to your financials. So I was really quick to delegate that out. And I didn't really have a good understanding of, how to read a financial forecast, how to read a P&L, how to even like net profit and gross profit. Like the whole thing just really bamboozled me. And I didn't take the time to actually learn about it. And that was a confidence thing for sure. In fact, I remember one particular investor meeting in 2015, right when I was raising that very first angel pre-seed round. An investor asked me about the cost, my customer acquisition cost. And I genuinely didn't know the answer. I didn't know the answer off the top of my head. I didn't even know what a customer acquisition cost was. I think I said something like, oh, my finance person has those numbers. I'll get back to you. And I just remember that the room went quiet and it was that awkward, heavy kind of quiet. And I did get the investment, but I remember walking out from that room feeling a bit like a fraud, like I wasn't a real founder because I didn't have command of my numbers and all of that. And I always felt like I was on a bit of a back foot with that person when it came to the financials. I always felt like I was proving myself, but I'm not bad with numbers. I just told myself that I was. I never took the time to actually learn them. I never sat down with a finance person and said, teach me, walk me through this. Tell me about this until I get it. I just opted out, and that cost me confidence and status with a lot of people, I think. So you don't have to be a CFO, but you do need to understand the basics, because when you don't, you can't make fully informed decisions. You can't spot problems early on. You just avoid it. You can't show up with rooms of investors and partners or people on your board with the confidence of somebody that knows their numbers. Now, I still have people on my team that are way better at this than me. In fact, Abby, who was with me then, is still with me now, 8 years later. But I do understand the financials. I can read a P&L. I know what the key metrics are that I need to look out for. And when I walk into a room, I can speak to every part of my business with confidence now. And I definitely couldn't do that before. So instead of delegating and walking away, what I want you to do is take the time to tell yourself that you are good with numbers and ask yourself, where is that limiting belief coming from anyway? And just getting comfortable with that language, that finance language, because you can delegate tasks, but you can't delegate understanding. And as the founder, you really need to know what's happening in every critical part of your business, not to micromanage it, but to lead it. Now, research shows us that only 10 to 15% of people actually are self-aware enough to know what they don't know, which means that most of us are just walking around with blind spots that we don't even see. And if you're telling yourself that you're bad at something, you might just be opting out from learning it. So if you're avoiding the financials or any other part of your business because you've just decided that you're not good at it, stop. You don't have to be an expert, but you do need to understand it well enough to lead confidently. So you can delegate it, but don't abdicate it. And trust me, when you walk into a room and you know your numbers, it changes everything. So mistake number 4, I became so consumed by being the founder that I forgot who I actually was outside of it. And this is probably the one that caused me the most pain throughout my whole journey. When you start a business, especially one that you're passionate about, it's really easy to become your business, for that to become your entire identity. You wake up thinking about it. You go to bed thinking about it. Every conversation somehow circles back to the business. You stop having hobbies. You stop seeing friends who aren't somehow connected to your work. You stop doing the things that used to light you up. And at first that feels like dedication. It's really dangerous because it feels like sacrifice in service of something bigger. But what it actually is you losing yourself. I remember sitting in a coffee shop one day, maybe 1-2 years into Career Cake, and someone asked me, what do you do for fun? And I just stared at them. I had absolutely no idea. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done anything just because I enjoyed it. Everything was tied up into the business, growing the business in some way. Now, my friendships started to drift, not because people didn't care about me, but just because I couldn't talk about anything except the business. To be honest, I was probably exhausted and boring to be around. I was always on, always in founder mode. I was never just me. And then there was that validation piece. Because as a founder, it's your job to validate your team, to support them and celebrate their wins. But nobody's doing that for you, not in the same way. And if your entire identity is tied up into your business, it's really easy to just start feeling invisible. Do people actually care about me, or just care about what I can give them or what I provide for them? It's terrifying. So this is what I learned. You are not your business. You are a human being that has value, and value that exists completely outside of what you're building. And I know that there's a really good chance that you're listening to this, but you're not actually hearing the words, not fully. And I know that because people used to say this to me when I was building my business, and I would just smile and I'd be like, yeah, I just think, yeah, you just don't get it. But I promise, I do know. And if you lose yourself in the founder role, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to burn out even faster because your whole sense of self is entirely dependent on something completely out of your control. And two, you become less effective as a founder because you're running on empty. So now I protect my identity outside of work. I've got my little doggy here, and I volunteer at an animal rescue centre. I spend time with my son, with my husband, with my dogs Oscar and Sophie. I've got hobbies and relationships and friendships, and I've got nothing to do with my business. And I make time for that. Because when I'm connected to who I am, who Amy is outside of my work, I'm definitely a better founder inside of my work. And if you're feeling lost, if you're wondering who you are, it's definitely time to reconnect to that, to parts of you that exist outside of your work. Because those parts, they're the parts that keep you human. They're the parts that keep you smiling. And being all of you is what makes you a great leader and founder. So mistake number 5. So I spent too much time comparing myself to everybody else and feeling like I was behind. And this one's really tricky because at the time it doesn't feel like a mistake. At the time it just feels like it's just a reality, right? Like you're on LinkedIn, you see another founder who's raised a big investment round, or you're on Instagram and somebody's celebrating because they hit 7 figures. Or you're just at a networking event and you've met somebody and they just seem further along or more polished or better dressed or more confident, more successful, all this stuff. And you just start thinking, why am I not there yet? What am I doing wrong? And then you just think, maybe I'm just not cut out for it. And I did this constantly. I would compare our growth of our startup in our space to everybody else's startup journey in other spaces. And I would compare the version of me to their polished, put together stuff that they were just posting online. And it would make me feel like I was failing. Even when we were doing well objectively, hitting targets, I still felt like I was behind because I was measuring myself against everyone else's highlight reel. 72% of entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues. And a huge part of that is the pressure that they put on themselves to look successful and comparing themselves to everybody else. So feel free to unfollow accounts that make you feel like you're not enough. I started measuring my success against my own goals, not someone else's. And that's so freeing. It's so wonderful. And just think, am I further along than I was last year? Yes. Am I building something that I'm proud of? Yes. Am I living in alignment to my values? Yes. Those are the only questions that really matter. If you're stuck in comparison mode, this is your reminder. Your journey is yours, not theirs. And the only person that this needs to make sense to, and the only person that you need to feel good about and better than, is you and who you were yesterday. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it is so true. All right, so those are the 5 mistakes. And if I could go back to talk to my 2010 self, this is what I would say to her. And it's the same thing that I'm going to say to you. You are going to make mistakes, a lot of them. And that's okay. And that is actually part of the gig, because every mistake taught me something. And now I get to pass on all of those lessons to other founders. I feel like I didn't go through all of that for nothing. So from one founder to another, take care.